Million-Word Reading Project. Collection 1. Book 8. The Railway Children. Produced by Million-Word Reading Project Workshop. Chapter 1. The Beginning of Things. They were not railway children at first. They were just ordinary children, and they lived with their father and mother in an ordinary house. There were 3 of them. Roberta was the eldest and was their mother's favorite. Next came Peter, who wished to be an engineer when he grew up, and the youngest was Phyllis, who was extremely kind. Mother was almost always there, ready to play with the children, and read to them, and help them to do their home lessons. She also used to write stories for them while they were at school, and read them aloud after tea. These 3 lucky children always had everything they needed. Pretty clothes, good fires, a lovely nursery with lots of toys, and a Mother Goose wallpaper. They had a kind and merry maid, and a dog called James. They also had a kind father who was just perfect. He was never angry, and always ready to play a game. You will think that they ought to have been very happy. But they did not know how happy they were till the pretty life was over, and they had to live a very different life indeed. The terrible change came quite suddenly. Peter had a birthday, his 10th. Among his other presents was a model engine, which he loved best of all. But after 3 days, while Peter and Phyllis were playing with it, the engine went off suddenly. It made such a loud noise that James ran out and did not come back all day. Peter was very sad. The others said he cried over it, but of course boys of 10 do not cry. He said that his eyes were red because he had a cold. This turned out to be true, and the next day he had to go to bed and stay there. Mother began to be afraid, when suddenly he sat up in bed and said eagerly, "I want to get up and have a pigeon pie. A very large one." So Mother asked the cook to make a large pigeon pie. And when it was cooked, Peter ate some of it. After that his cold was better. Father had been away in the country for 3 or 4 days. Peter hoped his father could mend his engine for him, for father was very clever with his fingers. He could mend all sorts of things. Peter did not say anything about his engine till after father had had his dinner and his after-dinner cigar. At last Mother said to father, "Now, dear, if you're quite rested, we want to tell you about the great railway accident, and ask your advice." "All right," said father, "go ahead." So then Peter told the sad tale, and fetched what was left of the engine. Father looked the engine over very carefully. The children held their breaths. "Is there no hope?" said Peter, in a low voice. "Hope? Rather. Lots of it," said father, cheerfully, "but we'll need something. I think we'd better keep it for a rainy day. I'll mend it on Saturday afternoon, and you shall all help me." Just then there was a knock at the front door. Ruth, the maid, came in and said that 2 gentlemen wanted to see the master. "I've shown them into the library, sir," said she. "Get rid of them quickly, dear," said Mother. It nearly time for the children to go to bed. But father did not seem to be able to get rid of the gentlemen at all quickly. Mother tried to make the time pass by telling the children a new story, but it was difficult because they could hear the voices of father and the gentleman in the library. Father's voice sounded louder and different this time. Then the library bell rang. "They're going now," said Phyllis. Then Ruth came in, and she looked strange, the children thought. "Please, madam," she said, "the master wants you to go into the study. He looks terrible. I think he's had bad news. You'd best prepare yourself for the worst." "That'll do, Ruth," said Mother gently, "you can go." Then Mother went into the library. There was more talking. Then the bell rang again, and Ruth fetched a cab. The children heard boots go out and down the steps. The cab drove away, and the front door shut. Then Mother came in. Her dear face was white, and her eyes looked very big and shining. "It's bedtime," she said. "Ruth will put you to bed. But you promised we should sit up late tonight because father's come home," said Phyllis. "Father's been called away on business," said Mother. "Come, darlings, go at once." They kissed her and went. Late that night Mother came up and kissed all 3 children as they lay asleep. But Roberta woke up when she kissed her. She lay still and said nothing. If Mother doesn't want us to know she's been crying, she said to herself, we won't know it. That's all. When they came down to breakfast the next morning, Mother had already gone out to London, Ruth said, and left them to their breakfast. There's something wrong, said Peter, breaking his egg. Ruth told me last night we should know soon enough. Did you ask her? Said Roberta. Yes, I did, said Peter, angrily. If you could go to bed without caring whether Mother was worried or not, I couldn't. It was nearly 7 before Mother came in. She looked so ill and tired that the children felt they could not ask her any questions. When she had had a cup of tea, Mother said, now, my darlings, I want to tell you something. Those men last night did bring very bad news. Father will be away for some time and I am very worried about it. I want you all to help me, and not to make things harder for me. Be good and happy and don't quarrel when I'm away, for I shall have to be away a good deal. We won't quarrel. Indeed we won't, said everybody. Then Mother went on, I want you not to ask me any questions about this trouble, and not to ask anybody else any questions. It's about business, and you never understand business, do you? No, said Roberta. Is it something to do with government? For Father was in a government office. Yes, said Mother. Now it's time to go to bed, my darlings. And don't you worry. Everything will be all right in the end. Then don't you worry either, Mother, said Phyllis, and we'll all be very good. Mother sighed and kissed them. Everything was terrible for some weeks. Mother was nearly always out. The maid was sent away. Then one day, after Mother came home, she went to bed and stayed there 2 days. The doctor came, and the children wondered if the world was coming to an end. Mother came down one morning to breakfast. She was very pale and with lines on her face that had not been there before. And she smiled as well as she could and said, now, children, everything is settled. We're going to leave this house and go and live in the country. Such a pretty little white house. I know you'll love it. They spent the next week packing, not just packing clothes, like when you go to the seaside, but packing chairs and tables. The children enjoyed it very much. Mother was very busy, but not too busy now to talk to them and read to them. When all the useful things had been packed up and taken away in a van, the 2 girls and Mother slept in the 2 spare rooms. All their beds had gone. A bed was made up for Peter on the drawing room sofa. Next day boxes were filled, and boxes and more boxes, and then late in the afternoon a cab came to take them to the station. At first they enjoyed looking out of the window, but when it grew dark they grew sleepier and sleepier. No one knew how long they had been in the train when they were woken up by Mother. She shook them gently and said, wake up, dears. We're there. They woke up, cold and sad. They stood trembling on the cold platform while the baggage was taken out of the train. Then the engine dragged the train away. This was the first train the children saw on that railway. They did not guess then how they would grow to love the railway, or what wonders and changes it would bring to them. They only hoped the walk to the new house would not be long. Come, said Mother, we've got to walk. There aren't any cabs here. The road was dark and muddy. The cart went slowly, and they followed the noise of its wheels. As their eyes got used to the darkness, they could see the boxes in front of them. The long gate had to be opened for the cart to pass through, and after that the road seemed to go across fields. Soon, a great dark shape appeared to the right. There's the house, said Mother. But I wonder why she's shut the shutters. Who's she? Asked Roberta. The woman from the village. I asked her to clean the place and get supper. There was a low wall and trees inside. That's the garden, said Mother. The cart went on along by the garden wall and round to the back of the house. There was no light in any of the windows. Everyone knocked hard at the door, but no one came. The man who drove the cart said he expected Mrs. Viney had gone home. You see, your train was that late, said he. But she's got the key, said Mother. What are we to do? Oh, she'll have left that under the doorstep, said the cart man. He found the key there, unlocked the door. Then he went in. Is there a candle here? Said he. I don't know where anything is. Mother spoke rather less cheerfully than usual. He struck a match. There was a candle on the table, and he lighted it. The children saw a large bare kitchen with a stone floor. There were no curtains. The kitchen table from home stood in the middle of the room. The chairs were in one corner, and the pots, pans and brooms in another. As the cartman turned to go out after he had brought in the boxes, there was a sound that seemed to come from inside the walls of the house. Oh, what's that? Cried the girls. It's only the rats, said the cartman. As he went away and shut the door, the sudden wind blew out the candle. Oh, dear, said Phyllis, I wish we hadn't come. And she knocked a chair over. Only the rats, said Peter, in the dark. Chapter 2. Peter and the Coal. What fun, said Mother, in the dark, feeling for the matches on the table. How frightened the poor rats were. She struck a match and lighted the candle again. Well, she said, you've often wanted something to happen, and now it has. This is quite an adventure, isn't it? I told Mrs. Viney to get us some bread and butter, and meat and things, and to have supper ready. I suppose she's laid it in the dining room. So let's go and see. The dining room opened out of the kitchen. There was the table certainly, and there were chairs, but there was no supper. Let's look in the other rooms, said Mother, and they looked. But there was nothing to eat in any room. What a terrible old woman, said Mother. She's just walked off with the money and not got us anything to eat at all. Then shan't we have any supper at all? Asked Phyllis. Oh, yes, said Mother. But we must unpack one of those big cases that we put in the cellar. Phil, be careful where you're walking to. Peter, hold the light. The cellar door opened out of the kitchen. There were 5 wooden steps leading down. It wasn't a proper cellar at all, the children thought, because its ceiling went up as high as the kitchen's. There was wood in it, and coal. Also the big cases. Peter held the candle, and Mother opened the great packing case. Oh, said Mother, here are some candles. You girls go and light them. How many shall we light? As many as ever you like, said Mother, gladly. The great thing is to be cheerful. Nobody can be cheerful in the dark. So the girls lighted 14 candles. Roberta fetched coal and wood and lighted a fire. The firelight and the candlelight made the dining room look very different. Now you could see that the dark walls were made of wood. The girls quickly tidied the room. Everyone was very tired, but everyone cheered up at the sight of the funny supper. There were biscuits, potato chips and dried fruits. They had to drink water out of the teacups, because the glasses couldn't be found. After supper, they put sheets and blankets on the beds. Good night, dears, said Mother. I'm sure there aren't any rats. But I'll leave my door open, and then if a mouse comes, you need only scream. Then I'll come and tell it exactly what I think of it. Then she went to her own room. At 2 o'clock, Roberta woke up, and she heard Mother still moving about in her room. Next morning Roberta woke Phyllis up. Wake up, said Roberta. We're in the new house, don't you remember? No servants or anything. Let's get up and begin to be useful. We'll just get down quietly and have everything beautiful before Mother gets up. I've woken Peter. He'll be dressed as soon as we are. So they dressed quietly and quickly. Of course, there was no water in their room, so when they got down they washed under the spout of the pump in the yard. One pumped and the other washed. It was interesting. The house seemed to stand in a field near the top of a hill, and they could see a long way. This is much prettier than our old house in London, said Phyllis. I wonder what the garden's like. We mustn't think of the garden yet, said Roberta. Let's go in and begin to work. They lighted the fire and put the kettle on, and they arranged the plates for breakfast. When there seemed to be nothing more that they could do, they went out again into the fresh bright morning. It was a hilly country. Down below they could see the line of the railway, and the black mouth of a tunnel. The station was out of sight. There was a great bridge across one end of the valley. "Let's go down and look at the railway," said Peter. "There might be trains passing." "We can see them from here," said Roberta, slowly. "Let's sit down a bit." So they all sat down on a great flat grey stone in the grass. It was one of many that lay about on the hillside. When Mother came out to look for them at 8 o'clock, she found them deeply asleep in the warm sun. They had made an excellent fire, and had set the kettle on it at about 5:30. So by 8 the fire had been out for some time, the water had all boiled away, and the bottom was burned out of the kettle. Also they had not thought of washing the plates before they set the table. "I've found another room," said Mother. "I'd quite forgotten there was one. And it's magic. And I've boiled the water for tea in a saucepan." The forgotten room opened out of the kitchen. In the half-darkness the night before, its door had been mistaken for a cupboard's. It was a little square room, and on its table, all nicely set out, was cold roast beef, bread, butter, cheese, and a pie. "Pie for breakfast!" cried Peter. "How funny!" "It isn't pigeon pie," said Mother, "it's only apple." "Well, this is the supper we ought to have had last night." And there was a note from Mrs. Viney. "Her son-in-law has broken his arm, and she had to get home early. She's coming this morning at 10. That was a wonderful breakfast. It is unusual to begin the day with cold apple pie, but the children all said they would rather have it than meat. "You see, it's more like dinner than breakfast to us," said Peter, "because we were up so early. All day, the children helped Mother to unpack and arrange things. They carried clothes and all sorts of things to their proper places. When it was quite late in the afternoon, Mother said, 'There. That'll do for today. I'll lie down for an hour till supper time.' So the children went to the railway, and as soon as they started for the railway they saw where the garden had hidden itself. It was right behind the stables, and it had a high wall all round. 'Oh, never mind about the garden now,' cried Peter. 'Mother told me this morning where it was. It'll keep till tomorrow. Let's get to the railway.' At the bottom of the hill there was a wooden fence. And there was the railway, with the shining metals and the telegraph wires and posts and signals. They all climbed on to the top of the fence. Suddenly there was a loud noise. They looked along the line to the right towards the dark mouth of a tunnel. Next moment a train had rushed out of the tunnel, and had slid noisily past them. They could feel the fence shaking. "Oh," said Roberta, drawing a long breath, "it was like a great dragon going by. Did you feel it fan us with its hot wings? I suppose a dragon's home might look very much like that tunnel from the outside," said Phyllis. But Peter said, "I never thought we should ever get as near to a train as this. It's the most exciting sport. Better than toy engines, isn't it?" said Roberta. I am tired of calling Roberta by her name. Everyone else called her Bobbie, and I don't see why I shouldn't. "I don't know, it's different," said Peter. "It seems so strange to see all of a train. It's so tall, isn't it? I wonder if that train was going to London," Bobbie said. "London's where Father is." "Let's go down to the station and find out," said Peter. They walked along the edge of the line, under the telegraph wires, and reached the station at last. They went up onto the platform, and took a quick look into the porter's room. There was one porter half asleep behind a paper. There were a great many railway lines at the station. On one side was a great heap of coal, and there was a white line near the top of the wall built of big pieces of coal. Later, when the porter came out of his room, Peter said, "How do you do?" in his best manner. Then he asked what the white mark was on the coal for. "To mark how much coal there be," said the porter, "so that we'll know if anyone steals it. So don't go off with any in your pockets, young gentlemen." This seemed a merry joke at that time, and Peter felt at once that the porter was a friendly man. But later the words came back to Peter with a new meaning. So the days went by. The children soon got used to being without father, though they did not forget him, and they got used to not going to school, and to seeing very little of mother. She was now shut up in her upstairs room almost all day, writing. She used to come down at tea time and read aloud the stories she had written. They were lovely stories. They were pleased with the rocks and hills and valleys and trees, the canal, and above all, the railway. And the old life in London seemed almost like a dream. Mother had told them more than once that they were quite poor now, but this did not matter to them. There was always enough to eat, and they wore the same kind of nice clothes they had always worn. But in June came 3 wet days, the rain came down, and it was very, very cold. Nobody could go out. They all went up to the door of Mother's room and knocked. "Well, what is it?" asked Mother from inside. "Mother," said Bobbie, "may I light a fire? I do know how." And Mother said, "No, my dear. We mustn't have fires in June. Coal is so expensive." "But, Mother, it only takes such a very little coal to make a fire." "It's more than we can afford, dear," said Mother, cheerfully. "Now run away, I'm very busy." "Mother's always busy now," said Phyllis, in a whisper to Peter. Peter did not answer. He was thinking. After tea the children went to the attic and Peter said to his sisters, "I have an idea." "What's that?" they asked politely. "I shan't tell you," was Peter's reply. "Oh, very well," said Bobbie, and Phil said, "Don't, then." After a while, he said, "The only reason why I won't tell you my idea is that it may be wrong, and I don't want to drag you into it." "Don't do it if it's wrong, Peter," said Bobbie, "let me do it." But Phyllis said, "I should like to do wrong if you're going to." "No," said Peter, "I'm going to do it. If Mother asks where I am, don't tell her." 2 days later, when it was growing dark, Peter called the girls. "Come here with me," he said, "and bring the cart." Then he led the way down the hill towards the station. Just above the station, there were many rocks. Between 3 rocks lay a heap of dried branches. Peter stopped, turned over the branches and said, "Here's some coal. We'll take it home in the cart." 3 journeys had to be made before the coal was added to the heap of Mother's coal in the cellar. "Tomorrow evening we'll bring home more coal." A week later, Mrs. Viney said to Mother that their coal was lasting longer than she had expected. The children hugged each other as they listened on the stairs. But there came a terrible night when the station master was waiting in the station yard where the heap of coal was. On the top of the heap, there was something small and dark, making a low noise. The station master hid himself in the shadow and waited till the small thing on the top of the heap came carefully down, and lifted something after it. Then the arm of the station master was raised, and the hand of the station master fell on a collar. There was Peter, with an old bag full of coal. "So I've caught you at last, you young thief," said the station master. "I'm not a thief," said Peter, but he did not sound so sure. "Come along to the station," said the station master. "Oh, no," cried a voice from the darkness. "Not the police station," said another voice from the darkness. "Not the railway station," said the station master. "Why, any more of you?" "Only us," said Bobbie and Phyllis, as they came out of the shadow. "Come along to the station, all of you," said the station master. "Oh, don't," said Bobbie. "Can't you decide now what you'll do to us? It's our fault. We helped to carry the coal away and we knew where he got it." "No, you didn't," said Peter. "Yes, we did," said Bobbie. "We knew all the time. We only pretended we didn't." The station master struck a match and looked at them by its light. "Why," said he, "you're the children from the house there. So nicely dressed too. Tell me now, what made you do such a thing? Don't you know it's bad to steal?" He spoke much more gently now, and Peter said, "I didn't think it was stealing. I was almost sure it wasn't. I thought if I took it from the outside part of the heap, perhaps it would be. It'll take thousands of years for you to burn up all that coal and get to the middle parts. Not quite. But why did you do it? The station master's voice was much kinder. You know that wet day, replied Peter. Well, Mother said we were too poor to have a fire. We always had fires when it was cold at our other house, and don't, interrupted Bobbie, in a whisper. Well, said the station master, I'll tell you what I'll do. I won't punish you this once. But remember, young gentleman, stealing is stealing. Run along home. Do you mean you aren't going to do anything to us? Well, thank you, said Peter. Thank you very much, said Bobbie and Phyllis. That's all right, said the station master. Chapter 3. The Old Gentleman. After the adventure of the coal, the children could not keep away from the railway. Here in the deep silence of the sleeping country, the only things that went by were the trains. They went there every day. They began to know the hours when certain trains passed. There were the 9:15, the 10:07 and the midnight train that sometimes woke them up from their dreams. It was by the 9:15 that the old gentleman travelled. He was a very nice-looking old gentleman. He had a clean face and white hair, and he wore rather strange collars and a strange hat. Of course the children didn't see all this at first. In fact, the first thing they noticed about the old gentleman was his hand. One morning, they were sitting on the fence, waiting for the 9:15. The 9:15's going where Father is, said Phyllis. I wonder why Father never writes to us. Mother says he's been too busy, said Bobbie, but he'll write soon, she says. I say, Phyllis suggested, let's all wave to the 9:15 as it goes by. Maybe it will take our loves to Father. So when the 9:15 came, all three children waved their handkerchiefs. And out of a carriage a hand waved back. A quite clean hand. It held a newspaper. It was the old gentleman's hand. After this, waves were always exchanged between the children and the 9:15. The children, especially the girls, liked to think that perhaps the old gentleman knew Father. He would meet him, and tell him how his three children stood on a rail far away, and waved their love to him every morning. Mother, all this time, was very busy with her writing. She used to send off a good many long blue envelopes with stories in them, and large envelopes of different sizes and colors used to come to her. Sometimes she would sigh when she opened them and say, "Another story has returned home. Oh, dear." And then the children would be very sorry. But sometimes she would wave the envelope in the air and say, "Wonderful. A kind editor has taken my story." Whenever there was a kind editor, there were buns for tea. One day Peter was going down to the village to get buns when he met the station master. Peter felt very uncomfortable. He looked down and said nothing. It was the station master who said good morning as he passed by. And Peter answered, "Good morning. I'm going to buy buns for tea." "I thought you were all so poor," said the station master. "So we are," said Peter, "but we always have some pennies for tea whenever Mother sells a story or a poem or anything." "Oh," said the station master, "so your mother writes beautiful stories, does she? You ought to be very proud to have such a clever mother." "Yes," said Peter, "but she used to play with us more before." "Well," said the station master, "come to visit us at the station whenever you want. And as to the coal, oh, no, we never mention it, eh?" "Thank you," said Peter. Next day, after they had waved to the 9:15, and the old gentleman had waved back as usual, they went to the station and spent 2 happy hours with the porter. He was a kind man, and he told them many things about trains and railways that they had not known before. Time went by all too quickly. The station master came out once or twice. He was glad to see them all. He gave them each an orange, and promised to take them up into the signal box one day, when he wasn't so busy. Several trains went through the station, and Peter noticed for the first time that engines have numbers on them. The very next day, Mother had to stay in bed because her head ached so. Her hands were burning hot, and she would not eat anything. In the evening she felt so much worse that Peter was sent to fetch Dr. Forrest in the village. The doctor came at once. He talked to Peter on the way back. He seemed a most pleasant man, interested in railways and rabbits, and really important things. When he had seen Mother, he said it was flu. "I suppose you'll want to be nurse," he said to Bobbie in the hall. "Of course," said she. "Well, then, I'll send down some medicine. Keep up a good fire. Have some strong tea ready to give her as soon as the fever goes down. She can have grapes now, and milk, and you'd better get in a bottle of brandy. The best brandy. Cheap brandy is worse than poison." She asked him to write it all down, and he did. When Bobbie showed Mother the list he had written, Mother laughed. "I can't afford all those things," said Mother. "I should like some more water now, love." When Roberta had done everything she could to make Mother comfortable, she went down to the others. Her cheeks were very red, and her lips were set tight. She told them what the doctor had said, and what Mother had said. "And now," said she, when she had told all, "there's no one but us to do anything, and we've got to do it." "But we can't get all those things," said Phyllis. "No," said Bobbie, "we must find out some way. Now think, everybody, just as hard as ever you can." They did think. Later, Bobbie went up to sit with Mother in case she wanted anything. And the other two were very busy with scissors and a white sheet, and a paintbrush, and some black paint. Next morning, when the 9:15 came out of the tunnel, the old gentleman in the first-class carriage put down his newspaper, and got ready to wave his hand to the 3 children on the fence. But this morning there were not 3. There was only 1. And that was Peter. Peter was pointing at a large white sheet nailed against the fence. On the sheet there were thick black letters more than a foot long. The words were quite easy to read. "Look out at the station." A good many people did look out at the station and were disappointed, for they saw nothing unusual. The old gentleman looked out too, and at first he too saw nothing unusual. It was only just as the train was beginning to start again that he saw Phyllis. She was quite out of breath with running. "Oh," she said, "I thought I'd missed you. Here, take it." She pushed a warm letter into his hand as the train moved. The old gentleman sat back in his corner and opened the letter. This is what he read. "Dear Mr. We do not know your name. Mother is ill and the doctor says to give her the things at the end of the letter, but she says she can't afford it. We do not know anybody here but you, because Father is away and we do not know the address. Father will pay you, or if he has lost all his money or anything, Peter will pay you when he is a man. Please give the things to the station master, because we do not know what train you come down by. Tell him the things are for Peter, the boy who was sorry about the coals. Then he will understand. Roberta, Phyllis, Peter." Then came the list of things the doctor had ordered. The old gentleman read it twice and smiled a little. When he had read it 3 times, he put it in his pocket and went on reading his newspaper. At about 6 that evening there was a knock at the back door. The 3 children rushed to open it, and there stood the friendly porter, who had told them so many interesting things about railways. He put down a big box on the kitchen floor. "The old gentleman asked me to bring it to you," he said. After the porter left, the children opened the box. Inside were all the things they had asked for, and plenty of them. There were also a good many things they had not asked for: peaches, wine, 2 chickens and a box of big red roses. There was a letter too. "Dear Roberta and Phyllis and Peter," it said, "here are the things you want. Your mother will want to know where they came from. Tell her they were sent by a friend who heard she was ill. When she is well again you must tell her all about it, of course. And if she says you ought not to have asked for the things, tell her that I say you were quite right, and that I was pleased to help." The letter was signed G.P. "I think we were right," said Phyllis. "Right? Of course we were right, said Bobbie. All the same, said Peter, with his hands in his pockets, I don't want to tell Mother the whole truth about it. We're not to do it till she's well, said Bobbie. Oh, just look at the roses. I must take them up to her. Chapter 4. Bobbie's Ride. About 2 weeks later, the old gentleman saw another white sheet with black letters when he looked out of the train. It said, "She is nearly well. Thank you." The old gentleman waved to the children cheerfully from the train. And when this had been done, the children saw that it was now time to tell Mother what they had done when she was ill. And it did not seem so easy as they had thought. But it had to be done. And it was done. Mother was extremely angry. This was horrible. But it was much worse when she suddenly began to cry. Everyone began crying at once. Mother stopped first. She dried her eyes and then she said, "I'm sorry I was so angry, dears, because I know you didn't understand. We didn't mean to be bad, Mammy," said Bobbie. "Now, listen," said Mother, "it's quite true that we're poor, but we have enough to live on. You mustn't tell everyone about it, it's not right. And you must never, never ask strangers to give you things. Now always remember that, won't you?" They all hugged her and promised that they would. "And I'll write a letter to your old gentleman and thank him for his kindness. And you can give the letter to the station master to give him. Now we won't say any more about it." Afterwards, when the children were alone, Bobbie said, "Isn't Mother wonderful? Did you hear any other grown-up saying they were sorry they had been angry?" "Yes," said Peter, "she is wonderful, but it's terrible when she's angry." Then they took the letter down to the station master. After the station master went back to his own room, the children went down to the porter's room and talked to the porter. They learned several interesting things from him. They learned that his name was Perks, he was married and had 3 children. Next day was Roberta's birthday. In the afternoon, she was politely asked to go out till tea time. "You mustn't see what we're going to do until it's done," said Phyllis. "It's a great surprise." And Roberta went out into the garden alone. Now she had time to think. One of the things she thought of most was what Mother had said when she was ill. The words were, "Oh, what a doctor's bill there'll be for this." She walked round and round the garden. Soon, she made up her mind. She went out through the side door of the garden and came to the road by the canal. She walked along until she came to the bridge that led to the village, and here she waited. Shortly after that, there was a sound of wheels, which was just what she expected. The wheels were the wheels of the doctor's cart, and in the cart, of course, was the doctor. He stopped and called out, "Hello, head nurse. Do you want a lift?" "I wanted to see you," said Bobbie. "Your mother's not worse, I hope," said the doctor. "No, but—" "Well, jump in, then, and we'll go for a drive." Roberta climbed in, and the doctor made the brown horse turn round. "Tell me, what is it?" said the doctor. "It's rather hard to say," said Bobbie, "because of what Mother said." "What did Mother say?" "She said I wasn't to go telling everyone that we're poor." "But you aren't everyone, are you?" "Not at all," said the doctor, cheerfully. Well, I know doctors are very expensive, and Mrs. Viney told me that her doctoring only cost her 2 pence a week, because she belonged to a club." "Yes. You see, she told me what a good doctor you were. I asked her how she could afford you, because she's much poorer than we are. I've been in her house and I know. And then she told me about the club. I thought I'd ask you, and oh, I don't want Mother to be worried. Can't we be in the club too, like Mrs. Viney?" The doctor was silent. He was rather poor himself, and he had been pleased at getting a new family to attend. "You aren't angry with me, are you?" said Bobbie, in a very small voice. "Angry? How could I be? You're a very good little woman. Now look here, don't worry. I'll make it all right with your mother. Well, we must be turning back. And remember, you mustn't worry about doctor's bills or you'll be ill yourself." When Bobbie had parted from the doctor, she could not feel that she had done wrong. She knew that mother would perhaps think differently. But Bobbie felt that for once she was the one who was right, and she returned home happily. Phyllis and Peter met her at the back door. They were very clean and neat. There was only just time for Bobbie to make herself tidy before a little bell rang. "There," said Phyllis, "that's to show the surprise is ready. Now you wait till the bell rings again, and then you may come into the dining room." So Bobbie waited. When the little bell rang, Bobbie went into the dining room. She felt rather shy. Directly she opened the door, she found herself in a new world of light and flowers and singing. Mother, Peter and Phyllis were standing in a row at the end of the table. There were 12 candles on the table, one for each of Roberta's years. The table was covered with beautiful flowers, and several most interesting little packages. "Happy birthday, Bobbie!" they shouted happily. Bobbie felt as though she were going to cry. But before she had time to begin, they were all kissing and hugging her. "Now," said Mother, "look at your presents." They were very nice presents. There was a pretty handkerchief from Phyllis. There was a little silver brooch of Mother's, which Bobbie had known and loved for years. There was also a pair of blue glass vases from Mrs. Viney. And there were 3 birthday cards with pretty pictures and wishes. "That's my present," said Peter, suddenly putting his steam engine down on the table in front of her. It was full of sweets. "Oh, Peter!" cried Bobbie, "are you giving me the dear little engine that you're so fond of?" "Oh, no," said Peter very quickly, "not the engine. Only the sweets." Bobbie's face changed a little. Peter saw it. He hesitated a minute, then his face changed too, and he said, "I mean not all the engine. I'll let you have half, if you like." "Thank you," cried Bobbie, "it's a splendid present." Then she said to herself, "Well, the broken half shall be my half of the engine, and I'll get it mended and give it back to Peter for his birthday." It was a wonderful birthday. After tea, Mother played games with them. Then, when it was near bedtime, Mother had a lovely new story to read to them. "You won't sit up late working, will you, Mother?" Bobbie asked as they said good night. And Mother said no, she wouldn't. She would only just write to Father and then go to bed. But when Bobbie came down later, Mother was not writing, but leaning her head on her arms and her arms on the table. So Bobbie went quietly away, saying over and over, "She doesn't want me to know she's unhappy, and I won't know, I won't know." But it made a sad end to the birthday. The very next morning Bobbie began to watch her opportunity to get Peter's engine mended secretly. And the opportunity came the very next afternoon. Mother went by train to the nearest town to do shopping. When she went there, she always went to the post office. Peter and Phyllis went with her. Bobbie wanted an excuse not to go, but try as she would she couldn't think of a good one. And just when she felt that all was lost, her skirt caught on a big nail by the kitchen door, and there was a great tear all along the front of it. So the others went without her. When they had gone, Bobbie put on her everyday dress, and went down to the railway. She did not go into the station, but she went along the line to the end of the platform. She hid behind a bush on the other side of the railway. She waited patiently with the toy engine under her arm. Then when the next train came in and stopped, Bobbie went across the line and stood beside the engine. She had never been so close to an engine before. It looked much larger than she had expected, and it made her feel very small indeed. The engine driver and the fireman did not see her. They were talking to the porter on the other side. "If you please," said Roberta, but the engine was blowing off steam, and no one heard her. It seemed to her that she had to climb onto the engine and pull at their coats. Bobbie climbed onto the step of the engine, but at that moment, the train began to move. She suddenly became frightened. What if the train went on for hundreds of miles without stopping? How would she get home again? She had no money to pay for the return journey. And maybe they could lock me up for this, she thought. And the train was going faster and faster. She was too frightened to speak. Suddenly she put out her hand and caught hold of the nearest sleeve. The driver turned round quickly, and he and Roberta stood for a minute looking at each other in silence. Then the driver broke the silence. "Here's a young girl," he said, and Roberta burst into tears. "What are you doing here, you naughty little girl?" said the fireman. They made her sit down on an iron seat and told her to stop crying and tell them why she was there. Bobbie stopped crying. "Please, Mr. Engineer," she said, "I did call out to you, but you didn't hear me. I just climbed up to touch you on the arm. I am so sorry if I frightened you." "Oh, don't be angry, oh, please don't." "We aren't so angry," said the fireman. "What did you do it for?" "I wanted," said Bobbie, "I only wanted to ask you if you'd be so kind as to mend this." She took out the toy engine. "I thought," she said eagerly, "that perhaps you'd mend this for me because you're an engineer, you know." The engine driver took the little engine and looked at it. "My job's driving an engine, not mending her, especially such a small engine here," said the engine driver. "We'll see you get home safe. Jim, can you help this little girl with this engine?" The fireman smiled. "I should think I can," he replied. "Thank you," said Bobbie. Bobbie stayed on the train until it reached the next station. She learned the driver's name was Bill, and she asked him many questions about the steam engine. He showed her two little dials, like clock faces, and told her how one showed how much steam was going, and the other showed if the brake was working properly. Besides all the knowledge she had gained, Bobbie felt that she and Bill and Jim were now friends for life. At the next station, they handed her over to the guard of a returning train, a friend of theirs. Bobbie got home in time for tea. "Where have you been?" asked the others. "To the station, of course," said Roberta, but she would not tell them of her adventures. A week later, Bobbie led her brother and sister to the station, and proudly introduced them to her friends, Bill and Jim. The two children were very surprised. And Peter was very excited when he saw his engine, now as good as new again. And only when the three children went home up the hill did Bobbie tell the others about her adventures on the train. Chapter 5. Prisoners. It was one day when Mother had gone to Maidbridge. She had gone alone, but the children were to go to the station to meet her. They started out more than an hour before the train arrived. It happened to be raining hard and was very cold for July, so they had to run to the station. "Perhaps it'll have stopped raining by then," said Bobbie. "But I'm glad I brought Mother's umbrella." They went into the waiting room and played games there to pass the time. When a train arrived, the children rushed out to see it pass. When it left, they saw a crowd of people on the platform round the door of the station. "Oh!" cried Peter excitedly, "something's happened. Come on." They ran down the platform. Everybody was talking at once. It was clear that something had happened. Then they heard the voice of the station master. "Now, move along there. I'll attend to this." But the crowd did not move. Then came a voice in a foreign language. It was a language that they had never heard. And none of the crowd understood the foreign language, either. Peter pushed in through the crowd. It was a man with long hair and wild eyes. His hands and lips trembled, and he spoke again as his eyes fell on Peter. Peter shook his hands as warmly and looked at him as kindly as he could. "Take him into your room," whispered Bobbie to the station master. "Mother can talk French. Maybe she can help you. She'll be here by the next train from Maidbridge." The station master took the arm of the stranger. But the man pulled his arm away and stepped back. He was coughing, trembling and trying to push the station master away. "Oh, don't," said Bobbie. "Don't you see how frightened he is? He thinks you're going to shut him up." "I know he does, look at his eyes." "Oh, let me try." Bobbie shook hands with the man kindly. Then she pulled him gently towards the station master's room. The other children followed, and the station master shut the door. Inside the station master's room, Bobbie still held the stranger's hand. He has no ticket, said the station master, and he doesn't even know where he wants to go. We'd better send for the police. Oh, don't, said all the children at once. And suddenly Bobbie got between the others and the stranger, for she had seen that he was crying. It happened that she had a handkerchief in her pocket. Standing in front of the stranger, she got out the handkerchief and passed it to him, so that the others did not see. The train from Matebridge arrived. I'll stay with him till you bring Mother in, said Bobbie. You're not afraid? Oh, no, said Bobbie, looking at the stranger. You wouldn't hurt me, would you? She smiled at him, and he smiled back. The station master and Peter and Phyllis went out to meet the train. Bobbie was still holding the stranger's hand when they came back with Mother. The man rose and bowed very politely. Then Mother spoke in French, and he replied. Well, what's it all about? Asked the station master. Oh, said Mother, it's all right. He's a Russian, and he's lost his ticket. And I'm afraid he's very ill. If you don't mind, I'll take him home with me now. He's really quite tired out. I'll come down and tell you all about him tomorrow. I hope he is not a bad man, said the station master. Oh, no, Mother smiled, I'm quite sure he is not. Why, he's a great man in his own country, writes books, beautiful books, I've read some of them, but I'll tell you all about it tomorrow. She spoke again in French to the Russian, and everyone could see that he was surprised and thankful. He got up and politely bowed to the station master. You girls run home and light a fire in the sitting room, Mother said, and Peter had better go for the doctor. When the doctor arrived, the Russian was sitting in the armchair near a bright wood fire, drinking the tea Mother had made him. The man seems tired out, was what the doctor said. The cough's bad, but it can be cured. He ought to go straight to bed, and let him have a fire at night. I'll make one in my room, it's the only one with a fireplace, said Mother. She did, and soon the doctor helped the stranger to bed. Later on, Mother came into the girls' room. She was to sleep there in Phyllis's bed, and Phyllis was to have a mattress on the floor. As soon as Mother came in, the eager girls asked, Now, Mother, tell us all about the Russian gentleman. A white shape came into the room. It was Peter, dragging his quilt behind him. Do tell us, he said. Well, he's a writer, he's written beautiful books. In Russia at the time of the Tsar, one dared not say anything about the rich people doing wrong. If one did, one was sent to prison. He wrote a beautiful book about poor people and how to help them. I've read it. There's nothing in it but kindness. And they sent him to prison for it. He was 3 years in a horrible prison, with hardly any light. Mother's voice trembled a little and stopped suddenly. But, Mother, said Peter, that can't be true now. It sounds like something out of a history book. It was true, said Mother. Well, then they took him out and sent him to Siberia with other prisoners. How did he get away? When the war came, some of the Russian prisoners were allowed to join the army. And he joined. But he ran away at the first chance he got. And he didn't know what had happened to his wife and children. Oh, cried Bobbie, he had them to worry about, then, all the time he was in prison. Yes, he had them to worry about and be sad about all the time he was in prison. They might have been sent to prison too. But while he was in Siberia, some friends managed to get a message to him that his wife and children had escaped and come to England. So when he ran away, he came here to look for them. Had he got their address? Said Peter. No, just England. He was going to London, and he thought he had to change at our station, and then he found he'd lost his ticket and his purse. Oh, do you think he'll find them? I mean his wife and children, not the ticket and things. I hope so. Oh, I hope and pray that he'll find his wife and children again. Why, Mother, said Phyllis, how very sorry you seem to be for him. Mother didn't answer for a minute. Then she just said, yes, and then she seemed to be thinking. The children were quiet. Then she said, dears, when you say your prayers, I think you might ask God to show his pity upon all prisoners. To show his pity, Bobbie repeated slowly, upon all prisoners. Is that right, Mother? Yes, said Mother, upon all prisoners. Chapter 6. Saving the train. The Russian gentleman was better the next day, and on the third day he was well enough to come into the garden. A chair was put for him and he sat there, dressed in clothes of father's. His face was kind now and was no longer tired and frightened, and he smiled at the children whenever he saw them. They wished very much that he could speak English. Mother wrote several letters to people who she thought might know where in England a Russian gentleman's wife and family might possibly be. The children wanted very much to show how kindly they felt to this man. They smiled at him. And they brought him flowers. One day, the children decided to go and look for wild cherries for the Russian. The trees grew all around the mouth of the tunnel. The mouth of the tunnel was some way from their house, so Mother let them take their lunch with them in a basket. When they got to the top of the cutting, they leaned over the fence and could see the railway lines at the bottom. Near the tunnel was a flight of steps leading down to the line. "We'd better get down," said Peter. "I'm sure the cherries would be quite easy to pick from the side of the steps." Suddenly, they heard a very strange noise. It was a soft noise, but it could be clearly heard. As they listened, it stopped, and then it began again. And this time it did not stop, but it grew louder. "Look," cried Peter suddenly, "the tree over there." The girls looked and saw a tree moving slowly downwards on the opposite side of the railway line. "It's moving," cried Bobbie. "Oh, look. And so are the others." "It's magic," said Phyllis, breathlessly. "I always knew this railway was magic." It really did seem a little like magic. For all the trees for about 20 yards of the opposite bank seemed to be slowly walking down towards the railway line. The trees moved on and on. Some stones and loose earth fell down on the railway metals far below. The great rock, on the top of which the walking trees were, leaned slowly forward. Then the rock and trees and grass and bushes slipped right away from the side of the cutting, and fell on the line with a loud noise. A cloud of dust rose up. "It's right across the line," said Phyllis, feeling a little frightened now. "Yes," said Peter, slowly. "Yes," he said again, still more slowly. Then he stood still. "The 11:29 train hasn't gone by yet. We must let them know at the station, or there'll be a terrible accident." "Let's run," said Bobbie, and began. But Peter cried, "Come back," and looked at his watch. His face was white. "No time," he said, "it's 2 miles away, and it's past 11. If we had anything red, we could get down on the line and wave it." "But the train wouldn't see us till it got round the corner," said Phyllis. "If we only had something red," Peter repeated, "we could go round the corner and wave to the train." "We might wave, anyway." They got down the steep stairs. "Our petticoats," said Phyllis. "They're red. Let's take them off." Bobbie turned at the bottom of the stairs. "Oh, yes," she cried. "They're red. Let's take them off." The girls did this, and then the 3 of them ran along the line to a corner. When they were round the corner, it was impossible to see the heap of trees and rocks. "Now," said Peter, taking hold of the largest petticoat. "You're not," said Phyllis, "you're not going to tear them." "Oh, yes," said Bobbie, "tear them into little bits if you like. You see, Phil, if we can't stop the train, there'll be a real live accident. Many people will be killed. Oh, horrible." They divided each petticoat into 3 pieces and put them to sticks. Now, they had 6 flags. 2 of the flags were set up in the loose stones between the lines. Then Phyllis and Roberta each took a flag and stood ready to wave it as soon as the train came in sight. Peter took the other 2. It seemed a very long time that they waited. And then came the noise of the train in the distance. "Wave your flags," said Peter, "but don't stand on the line, Bobbie." The train came along very, very fast. "They don't see us. They won't see us. It's all no good," cried Bobbie. The lines began to shake, and the 2 flags that were pushed into the heaps of stones soon fell over, but Bobbie ran across and picked up one of them. Her hands did not tremble now. It seemed that the train came on as fast as ever. It was very near now. "Get back, Bobbie!" shouted Peter. "It's no good," Bobbie said again. "Stand back!" cried Peter suddenly, and he dragged Phyllis back by the arm. But Bobbie cried, "Not yet, not yet," and waved her 2 flags right over the line. "Oh, stop, stop, stop!" cried Bobbie. The train did stop, less than 20 yards from the place where Bobbie's 2 flags waved over the line. She saw the great black engine stop still, but somehow she could not stop waving the flags. When the driver and the fireman had got off the engine, Peter and Phyllis told them what had happened. When the others turned towards Bobbie, she was lying across the line. The engine driver picked her up, carried her to the train. It was horrible to see Bobbie lying so white and quiet, with her lips blue. They sat by Bobbie, and the train ran back. Before it reached their station, Bobbie had sighed and opened her eyes, and rolled herself over and begun to cry. This cheered the others. At the station, the 3 were the heroes of a meeting on the platform. They were highly praised for saving the train. "You'll hear from the company about this, I expect," said the station master. The children did not get any cherries, but they did not mind. Chapter 7. The Prize. One morning a letter came. It was for Peter and Bobbie and Phyllis. They opened it with great curiosity, for they did not often get letters. The letter said, "Dear Sir and Ladies, we would like to express our thanks to you for warning the train and stopping an accident. Please come to the station at 3 o'clock on the 30th of this month, if this time and place will be convenient to you. Yours truly, Jabez Inglewood, Secretary, Great Northern and Southern Railway Company." The children were so proud that they rushed to Mother with the letter. She also felt proud, and this made the children happier than ever. When at last it was the day, the 3 children went down to the station at the proper time. And everything that happened was so strange that it seemed like a dream. The station master came out to meet them and led them into the waiting room. There were quite a number of people there besides the porter. They recognized several people who had been in the train that day. Best of all, their own old gentleman was there, and his coat and hat and collar seemed different from anyone else's. He shook hands with them and then everybody sat down on chairs. A gentleman with glasses began quite a long speech. He said all sorts of nice things about the children's bravery. And then the old gentleman got up. He called the children one by their names, and gave each of them a beautiful gold watch and chain. "You must make a speech now and thank everyone for their kindness," whispered the station master in Peter's ear, and pushed him forward. Peter went forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said. Then there was a pause, and he heard his heart beating in his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he went on, "it's most good of you, and we shall treasure the watches all our lives, but what we did wasn't anything, really. At least, I mean it was very exciting, and what I mean to say, thank you all very, very much." The people clapped, and then everybody shook hands with them. It was a wonderful day. On the way home, Bobbie said, "I did want to talk to the old gentleman about something else, but there were so many people." "What did you want to say?" asked Phyllis. "I'll tell you when I've thought about it more," said Bobbie. So when she had thought a little more, she wrote a letter. "My dearest old gentleman," it said, "I want very much to ask you something. If you could get out of the train and go by the next, it would do. I do not want you to give me anything. Mother says we ought not to. And besides, we do not want any things. Only to talk to you about a prisoner. Your loving little friend, Bobbie." She got the station master to give the letter to the old gentleman. Next day she asked Peter and Phyllis to come down to the station to wait for the old gentleman from town. She explained her idea to them, and they completely agreed. When the train arrived, the old gentleman stepped from the train and looked up and down the platform. The three children went forward to meet him. "Hello," he said, shaking hands with them all in turn. "This is a very great pleasure." "It was good of you to get out," Bobbie said politely. He took her arm and drew her into the waiting room. Phyllis and Peter followed. "Well," said the old gentleman, "what is it?" "Oh, please," said Bobbie. "Yes," said the old gentleman. Bobbie told him the story of the Russian who had written the beautiful book about poor people, and had been sent to prison and to Siberia for just that. "And what we want most is to find his wife and children for him," said Bobbie, "but we don't know how." "What did you say his name was?" "I'll write it down for you," said Bobbie. The old gentleman got out a gold pencil case and a beautiful Russian leather notebook. "Here," he said, "right here." She wrote down his name. The old gentleman put on his pair of glasses. When he had read the name, he looked quite different. "That man," he said. "Why, I've read his book. It's translated into every European language. A fine book. And so your mother took him in. Well, well, your mother must be a very good woman." "Of course she is," said Phyllis. "And you're a very good man," said Bobbie, shyly. The old gentleman laughed. "I'm very glad you came to me about this. I know a great many Russians in London, and every Russian knows his name. Now tell me all about yourselves." The children told him their names and ages, their father's name and business, how long they had lived here, and a great deal more. And then it was time for the next train, and the old gentleman got into it with many goodbyes. 10 days later, the three children were sitting on the top of the biggest rock in the field below their house, when they saw the old gentleman coming towards their house. So they ran across the fields to greet him. "Good news," said he. "I've found your Russian friend's wife and child." Then he turned to Bobbie and said to her, "Here, you run on and tell him. The other two will show me the way." Bobbie ran. She told the news to the Russian and Mother sitting in the quiet garden. Mother's face lighted up, and she said half a dozen quick French words to the Russian. Hearing the words, the Russian jumped up with a cry. Then he took Mother's hand and kissed it gently, and then he sank down in his chair and sobbed. Bobbie crept away. She did not want to see the others just then. The old gentleman was the happiest. He seemed to be able to talk in French and English almost at the same moment, and Mother did nearly as well. It was a happy time. And the old gentleman gave the three children 3 large boxes of beautiful chocolates. The Russian's few belongings were packed, and they all saw him off at the station. As they turned to go up the hill, Bobbie saw her mother's face. "How tired you look, Mammy," she said. "Lean on me." "It's my place to give Mother my arm," said Peter. "I'm the head man of the family when Father's away." Mother took an arm of each. "How nice," said Phyllis, jumping joyfully, "to think of the dear Russian hugging his long-lost wife. The baby must have grown a lot since he saw it." "Yes," said Mother. "I wonder whether Father will think I've grown," Phyllis went on. "I have grown already, haven't I, Mother?" "Yes," said Mother. "Oh, yes." Chapter 8. The Terrible Secret. When they first went to live near the railway, the children had talked a great deal about their father. They had asked a great many questions about him, and what he was doing and where he was and when he would come home. Mother always answered their questions as well as she could. But as the time went on, they spoke less of him. Bobbie had felt almost from the beginning that for some strange reason these questions hurt Mother and made her sad. And little by little the others came to have this feeling, too. One day, when Mother was working very hard, Bobbie carried up her tea to the big room. "Here's your tea, Mother," said Bobbie. "Do drink it while it's hot." Mother laid down her pen. She ran her hands into her hair. "Put it ahead," said Bobbie. "Does it ache?" "No, yes, not much," said Mother. "Bobbie, do you think Peter and Phil are forgetting Father?" "No," said Bobbie. "Why?" None of you ever speak of him now. Bobbie stood first on one leg and then on the other. We often talk about him when we're by ourselves, she said. But not to me, said Mother. Why? Bobbie did not find it easy to say why. You, she said and stopped. She went over to the window and looked out. Bobbie, come here, said her mother, and Bobbie came. Now, said Mother, putting her arm round Bobbie, try to tell me, dear. Well, then, said Bobbie, I thought you were so unhappy about Daddy not being here. It made you worse when I talked about him. So I stopped doing it. And the others? I don't know about the others, said Bobbie. I never said anything about that to them. But I expect they felt the same about it as me. Bobbie dear, said Mother, I'll tell you. Father and I have had great trouble. At first, it did hurt to hear you all talking of him, as if everything were just the same. But it would be much more terrible if you were to forget him. That would be worse than anything. The trouble, said Bobbie, in a very little voice, I promised I would never ask you any questions, and I never have I? But the trouble, it won't last always. No, said Mother, the worst will be over when Father comes home to us. I wish I could comfort you, said Bobbie. Oh, my dear, do you suppose you don't? Do you think I haven't noticed how good you've all been? That's nothing, she said, to what? I must get on with my work, said Mother. Don't say anything to the others. That evening in the hour before bedtime, instead of reading to the children, Mother told them stories of the games she and Father used to have when they were children and lived near each other in the country. They were very funny stories, and the children laughed as they listened. Good night, said everyone. Bobbie hugged her mother more closely even than usual, and whispered in her ear, oh, I do love you so, Mummy, I do. When Bobbie came to think it all over, she tried not to wonder what the great trouble was. But she could not always help it. Father was not dead, Mother had said so. And he was not ill, or Mother would have been with him. Being poor wasn't the trouble. I mustn't try to think what it is, she told herself. No, I mustn't. That very afternoon, while the children were working in their garden, Peter hurt his feet. Hearing his cries, Mother put her head out of the window. Less than half a minute later, she was in the garden kneeling by the side of Peter. His right foot was bleeding. Mother tied her handkerchief round his foot. She and Bobbie carried him in and laid him on a chair in the dining room. Phyllis ran to the doctor's. Mother sat by Peter and washed his foot, and Bobbie went out and got tea ready. When the doctor came, he looked at the foot and bandaged it beautifully. He said that Peter must not put it to the ground for at least a week. He won't be lame, will he? Whispered Bobbie at the door. Oh, no, said Dr. Forrest. Don't worry, dear. It was terrible not to be able to go out. Peter was tired for many days after that. They moved his bed to the window, and from there Peter could see the smoke of the trains along the valley. But he could not see the trains. There were visitors, too. Mrs. Perks came up to ask how he was, and so did the station master, and several of the village people. But the time went slowly. I do wish there was something to read, said Peter. I read all our books 50 times over. I'll go to the doctor's, said Phyllis. He's sure to have some. Only about how to be ill, and about people's insides, I expect, said Peter. Perks has a whole heap of magazines that came out of trains when people are tired of them, said Bobbie. I'll run down and ask him. So the girls went their two ways. Bobbie found Perks busy cleaning lamps. And how's the young gentleman? Said he. Better, thanks, said Bobbie, but he's terribly bored. I came to ask if you'd got any magazines you could lend him. There, now, said Perks, rubbing his ear with a dirty piece of cotton waste. Why didn't I think of that, now? I was trying to think of something as would amuse him only this morning, and I couldn't think of anything better than a guinea pig. And a young boy I know is going to fetch that over for him this tea time. How lovely! A real live guinea. He will be pleased. But he'd like the magazines as well. Perks turned to a pile of papers in the corner and took up a heap 6 inches thick. "There," he said. "I'll just put a bit of string and a bit of paper round them." He pulled an old newspaper from the pile and made a parcel of it. "That's very kind of you," said Bobbie. She took the parcel and started. The papers were heavy, and when she had to wait at the crossing while a train went by, she rested the parcel on the top of the gate, and she looked at the printing on the old paper. Suddenly she held the parcel tighter and bent her head over it. It seemed like some horrible dream. She never remembered how she got home. But she went quietly to her room and locked the door. Then she opened the parcel and read it again. Her hands and feet were cold as ice and her face was burning. When she had finished reading, she drew a long breath. "So now I know," she said. What she had read was headed, "End of the trial." Sentence. The name of the man who had been tried was the name of her father. And the sentence was 5 years in prison. "Oh, Daddy," she whispered, "it's not true. I don't believe it. You never did it. Never, never, never." There was a knock on the door. "What is it?" said Bobbie. "It's me," said the voice of Phyllis. "Tea's ready, and a boy's brought Peter a guinea pig. Come along down." And Bobbie had to. Chapter 9. The Hound in the Red Shirt. Bobbie knew the secret now. An old newspaper had given the secret to her, and she had to go down to tea and pretend that there was nothing the matter. When she came in, everyone looked up from tea and saw her red eyes and her pale face. "My dear," cried Mother, jumping up, "whatever is the matter?" "My head aches, rather," said Bobbie. And indeed it did. "Has anything gone wrong?" Mother asked. "I'm all right, really," said Bobbie. When tea was over, Mother took out the tray, and Bobbie followed her. "She's gone to tell her," said Phyllis to Peter. "I wonder what she's done." "Broken something, I suppose," said Peter, "but she needn't be so silly over it. Listen." "Yes, they're going upstairs. She's taking Mother up to show her, I expect." When Bobbie had got Mother alone in her room, she locked the door and then stood quite still. All through tea, she had been thinking of what to say. She had decided that "I know all" or "all is known to me," or "the terrible secret is no longer a secret" would be the proper thing. But now that she and her mother and that newspaper were alone in the room together, she found that she could say nothing. Suddenly she went to Mother, put her arms round her and began to cry again. And still she could find no words, only "Oh, Mammy, oh, Mammy, oh, Mammy" over and over again. Mother held her very close and waited. Suddenly Bobbie broke away from her and went to her bed. From under her mattress, she pulled out the paper she had hidden there, and held it out, pointing to her father's name with a finger that shook. "Oh, Bobbie," Mother cried, after a little quick look, "you don't believe it. You don't believe Daddy did it." "No," Bobbie almost shouted. She had stopped crying. "That's all right," said Mother. "It's not true. And they've shut him up in prison, but he's done nothing wrong. He's good and noble, and he belongs to us. We have to think of that, and be proud of him, and wait." Again Bobbie held on to her mother, and again only one word came to her, but now that word was Daddy, and "Oh, Daddy, oh, Daddy, oh, Daddy." Again and again. "Why didn't you tell me, Mammy?" she asked later. "Are you going to tell the others?" Mother asked. "No." "Why?" "Because." "Exactly," said Mother, "so you understand why I didn't tell you. We two must help each other to be brave." "Yes," said Bobbie. "Mother, will it make you more unhappy if you tell me all about it? I want to understand." So then, sitting close to her mother, Bobbie heard all about it. She heard how those men had come to arrest Father, saying that he had sold state secrets to the Russians. She heard about the trial, and about the letters found in Father's desk at the office. "Oh, how could they look at him and believe it?" cried Bobbie, "and how could anyone do such a thing?" "Someone did it," said Mother, "and all the evidence was against Father. Those letters. Yes. How did the letters get into his desk? Someone put them there. And the person who put them there was the person who was really guilty. Perhaps he just pushed the letters into the desk to hide them when he thought he was going to be found out. Why don't you tell the lawyers or someone? There wasn't anyone that would have hurt father on purpose, was there? I don't know. The man under him got Daddy's place when the terrible thing happened. He was always jealous of your father because Daddy was so clever and everyone thought such a lot of him. And Daddy never quite trusted that man. Couldn't we explain all that to someone? Nobody will listen, said Mother, very sadly, nobody at all. Do you suppose I've not tried everything? No, my dearest, there's nothing to be done. All we can do, you and I and Daddy, is to be brave and patient. Mother, you've got very thin, said Bobbie. A little, perhaps. And oh, said Bobbie, I do think you're the bravest person in the world. We won't talk of all this anymore, will we, dear? Said Mother. We must be brave. And dear, try not to think of it. Try to be cheerful and to amuse yourself and the others. It's much easier for me if you can be happy and enjoy things. Wash your poor little round face, and let's go out into the garden. The other two were very gentle and kind to Bobbie. And they did not ask her what was the matter. A week later Bobbie managed to get away alone. And once more she wrote a letter. And once more it was to the old gentleman. My dear friend, she said, you see what is in this paper. It is not true. Father never did it. Mother says someone put the papers in Father's desk. And she says the man under him that got Father's place afterwards was jealous of Father, and Father suspected him a long time. But nobody listens to a word she says. You are so good and clever, and you found out about the Russian gentleman's wife directly. Can't you find out who did it? Then they would let Father out of prison. It is terrible, and Mother is getting so thin. Oh, do help me. We can't do anything. Peter and Phil don't know. I'll pray for you twice every day as long as I live if you'll only try. With love. Your little friend, Roberta. She put the newspaper in the envelope with her letter. Then she managed to take it down to the station alone. She gave the letter to the station master to give to the old gentleman next morning. Now she could only wait and see what happened. I say, said Bobbie, when she returned home and saw Peter and Phyllis, there's going to be a paper chase tomorrow. Who? Peter asked. Grammar school. Perks thinks the hare will go along by the line at first. We might go along the cutting. You can see a long way from there. Next morning, Mother let them take their lunch and go out for the day to see the paper chase. If we go to the top of cutting, said Peter, we shall see the workmen, even if we miss the paper chase. Of course it had taken some time to clear away the rocks and earth and trees that had fallen on the line. The children had often been down to watch the work. While they were watching with great interest, they suddenly heard a voice just behind them. Let me pass, please. It was the hare, a big boy, with dark hair lying flat on a very wet forehead. The bag of torn paper under his arm was fixed across one shoulder. The children stood back. The hare ran along the line, and the workmen stopped to watch him. He ran on and disappeared into the mouth of the tunnel. He shouldn't go in there, said one workman. Passengers are not allowed to cross the line. It's only a game and he isn't a passenger, said another. And now came the hounds, following the pieces of white paper. There were 30 of them, and they all came down the steep steps. Bobbie and Phyllis and Peter counted them as they passed. At the foot of the steps, they caught sight of the white paper along the line and turned towards the tunnel, and disappeared in the dark mouth of it. The last one was wearing a red shirt. It isn't so easy running in the dark, said one of the workmen. The tunnel takes 2 or 3 turns. Will they take a long time to get through? Peter asked. An hour or more. Then let's go across the top and see them come out at the other end, said Peter. We shall get there long before they do. The others agreed, and so they went. They climbed the steep steps and at last reached the top of the hill where they had so often wished to be. "Stop!" cried Peter, and threw himself flat on the grass. The very top of the hill was a smooth piece of land with green grass. The girls also threw themselves down flat. When they were rested enough to sit up and look round them, Bobbie cried, "Oh, look!" "What at?" said Phyllis. "The view," said Bobbie. "I love it, it's worth the climb." "The paper chase is worth the climb," said Phyllis. "Let's get on. It's all downhill now." "There's lots of time," said Peter. And there was. When they had got down near the top of the tunnel's mouth, there was no sign of the hare or the hounds. "They've gone long ago, of course," said Phyllis. "I don't think so," said Bobbie, "but even if they had, it's exciting here. We shall see the trains come out of the tunnel. We've never seen that from the top before." It was really a most exciting place to be in. It was like being on a bridge. "I know the paper chase has gone long ago," said Phyllis every 2 minutes. Suddenly, Peter cried, "Look out! Here he comes!" They all saw the hare, going very slowly, come out from the shadow of the tunnel. "There, now," said Peter, "what did I tell you? Now for the hounds." Very soon came the hounds, and they also were going slowly and seemed very tired. 2 or 3 who fell far behind came out long after the others. "There," said Bobbie, "that's all. Now what shall we do?" "Go along into the wood over there and have lunch," said Phyllis. "We can see them for miles from up here." "Not yet," said Peter. "That's not the last. There's the one in the red shirt to come yet. Let's see the last of them come out." They waited and waited and waited, but the boy in the red shirt did not appear. "Oh, let's have lunch," said Phyllis. "I'm so hungry." "Let's get down to the tunnel mouth," said Peter, "then perhaps we shall see him coming along from the inside. Perhaps he's had an accident. You stay up here and watch, Bobbie, and when I signal from below, you come down. We might miss seeing him on the way down, with all these trees." So the others climbed down, and Bobbie waited till they signaled to her from the line below. And then she, too, came down and joined the others on the line. And still there was no sign of the hound with the red shirt. "Oh, do let's have something to eat," said Phyllis. "I shall die if you don't, and then you'll be sorry." "Give her the sandwiches, and stop her silly mouth," said Peter. "Look here," he added, turning to Bobbie, "perhaps we'd better have one each, too. We may need all our strength. Not more than one, though. There's no time." "What?" asked Bobbie, her mouth already full, for she was just as hungry as Phyllis. "Don't you see," replied Peter, "that hound in the red shirt has had an accident. Perhaps even as we speak, he's lying with his head on the metals." "Come on," said Bobbie. "Phil, keep close behind me, and if a train comes, stand against the tunnel wall and hold your petticoats close to you." "Give me one more sandwich," said Phyllis, "and I will." "I'm going first," said Peter, and he went. It was not yet quite dark in the tunnel when Phyllis caught at Bobbie's skirt. "I want to go back," she said. "I don't like it. It'll be very dark in a minute. I won't go on in the dark." "I don't care what you say, I won't." "Don't be silly," said Peter. "I've got a candle end and matches, and what's that sound?" The sound grew louder and louder as they listened. "It's a train," said Bobbie. "Let me go back," cried Phyllis. "It's quite safe," said Bobbie. "Stand back." The noise was louder and louder. And, in the distance, they could see its eyes growing bigger and brighter. When it was rushing past, they could feel the hot air and smell the smoke. They pushed themselves flat against the tunnel wall. Phyllis and Bobbie held on to each other. Even Peter caught hold of Bobbie's arm, in case she should be frightened, as he explained afterwards. And now, slowly, the lights at the back of the train grew smaller and smaller, and so did the noise. When the train got out of the tunnel, all was silent in the tunnel. Peter took out a candle end and lighted it with a hand that trembled. "Come on," he said. "Oh," said Phyllis, "if the red-shirted one was in the way of the train." We've got to go and see, said Peter. Couldn't we go and send someone from the station? Said Phyllis. Would you rather wait here for us? Asked Bobbie, and of course she wouldn't. So the three went deeper into the tunnel. Peter led, holding his candle end high to light the way. After he had walked not more than 150 yards, Peter stood still and shouted hello. Then he went on much quicker than before. When the others caught him up, he stopped. And he stopped within a yard of the boy they had come to look for. The red-shirted boy was lying on the ground, beside the line, and his eyes were shut. Is he dead? Asked Phyllis. Dead? No, said Peter. He's fainted. What shall we do? Can we move him? Asked Bobbie. I don't know, he's a big boy. Suppose we bathe his forehead with water. No, I know we haven't any, but milk will do. There's a whole bottle. Yes, said Peter, and they rub people's hands, I believe. And now Peter and Bobbie rubbed the hands of the red-shirted one. Phyllis bathed his forehead with milk, and all three kept on saying, "Oh, look up, speak to me. Speak." Chapter 10. What Bobbie brought home. Oh, look up. Speak to me. Speak. The children said the words over and over again to the unconscious boy in a red shirt. Wet his ears with milk, said Bobbie. I know they do it to people that faint. So they wetted his ears, and some of the milk ran down his neck under the red shirt. It was very dark in the tunnel. The candle end, which now burned on a flat stone, gave hardly any light at all. Oh, do look up, said Phyllis. I believe he's dead. No, he isn't, said Bobbie. Peter shook the boy by the arm. And then the boy in the red shirt sighed and opened his eyes. But he shut them again and said in a very small voice, What's up? I'm all right. Drink this, said Peter, putting the nose of the milk bottle into the boy's mouth. The boy struggled. What is it? He said. It's milk, said Peter. Don't be afraid, you are in the hands of friends. Do drink it, said Bobbie, gently, it'll do you good. So he drank. And the three stood by without speaking to him. Let him be a minute, Peter whispered, he'll be all right soon. He was. I'm better now, said the boy. I remember all about it. He tried to move, but he stopped. I believe I've broken my leg, he said. Did you fall down? Asked Phyllis. Yes. How did you get here? We saw you all go into the tunnel, and then we went across the hill to see you all come out. And the others did, all but you, and you didn't. So we came to look for you, said Peter, with pride. You are very brave, I will say, said the boy. Oh, that's nothing, said Peter. Do you think you could walk if we helped you? I could try, said the boy. He did try. But he could only stand on one foot. Here, let me sit down. I feel like dying, said the boy. He lay down and closed his eyes. The others looked at each other. What shall we do? Said Peter. Look here, said Bobbie, quickly, you must go and get help. Go to the nearest house. Yes, that's the only thing, said Peter. Come on. Now, said Bobbie, I'll stay with him. You take the longest bit of candle, and be quick. I don't think Mother would like me leaving you, said Peter. Let me stay, and you and Phil go. No, no, said Bobbie, you and Phil go and lend me your knife. I'll try to get his boot off before he wakes up again. Hurry up. So they hurried up. Bobbie fixed the little candle end on a broken brick near the boy's feet. Then she opened Peter's knife. Then she got the boot off. She tried to pull off his stocking, but his leg was terribly swollen. So she cut the stocking down, very slowly and carefully. When Bobbie had got the stocking off, she saw the poor leg. The poor leg, she told herself, it needs something soft under it. She remembered her petticoat, so she took it off. She carefully lifted his leg and put the petticoat under it. The boy woke up a few minutes later. What's your name? said Bobbie. Jim. Mine's Bobbie. I say Bobbie. Yes. Wasn't there someone else just now? Yes, Peter and Phil, that's my brother and sister. They've gone to get someone to carry you out. You're very brave. Why didn't you go with the others? Somebody had to stay with you, said Bobbie. I say, I must put the candle out now. Then there will be just enough to get you out by. I say, Bobbie, said a voice through the darkness, aren't you afraid of the dark? Not very, that is. Let's hold hands, said the boy. He put out his large hand and took her little smooth one. They sat in the darkness and waited. Peter and Phyllis got out of the tunnel into the sunshine. It was very hot, and both children were soon out of breath. They went across the fields to the farm. When the men from the farm came into the tunnel with Peter and Phyllis, they found Bobbie and Jim fast asleep. They lifted Jim onto a piece of flat wood. Where does he live? Asked one of the men. In Northumberland, answered Bobbie. I'm at school at Maidbridge, said Jim. I suppose I've got to get back there. The doctor ought to see you first, said the man. Oh, bring him up to our house, said Bobbie. It's only a little way by the road. I'm sure Mother would say we ought to. Are you sure your mother won't mind? Whispered Jim. Certain, said Bobbie. Then we're to take him up to your house, said the man. Of course, said Peter. Mother was writing a story when Bobbie came running home. Her face was red. Oh, Mother, she cried, do come down. We found a boy in the tunnel, and he's broken his leg. They're bringing him home. Then he ought to be taken home to his mother, said Mother. His mother's dead, said Bobbie, and his father's in Northumberland. Oh, Mother, you will be nice to him. I told him I was sure you'd want us to bring him home. You always want to help everybody. Mother smiled, but she sighed too. Oh, well, said Mother, we must make the best of it. When Jim was carried in, he was terribly white. I am glad you brought him here, said Mother. Now, Jim, let's get you comfortable in bed before the doctor comes. And Jim looked at her kind eyes and felt warm. I'm sorry to give you all this trouble, he said. Don't worry, said Mother, it's you that have the trouble, you poor dear, not us. And she kissed him just as if he had been Peter. We love to have you here, don't we, Bobbie? Yes, said Bobbie, and she saw by her mother's face how right she had been to bring home the wounded hound in the red shirt. Chapter 11. The Hound's Grandfather. Mother did not get back to her writing all that day. The red-shirted hound whom the children had brought to their house had to be put to bed, and then the doctor came and operated on Jim. That hurt him terribly, and Mother was with him all through it. Later in the evening, Mother was sitting at her table when Peter came to the door. May I come in, Mother? Said Peter. Yes, dear, said Mother. Anything wrong? She wrote a few more words and then laid down her pen. I was just writing to Jim's grandfather. He lives near here, you know. Yes, you said so at tea. That's what I want to say. Must you write to him, Mother? Couldn't we keep Jim, and not say anything to his people till he's well? It would be such a surprise for them. Well, yes, said Mother, laughing, I think it would. You see, Peter went on, of course the girls are all right. But I should like it if I had another boy to talk to sometimes. Yes, said Mother, I know that, dear. But I can't help it. Next year perhaps I can send you to school. You'd like that, wouldn't you? I do miss the other boys, rather, said Peter, but if Jim could stay after his leg was well, we could have a wonderful time together. Well, said Mother, perhaps he could, but you know, dear, we're not rich. I can't afford to get him everything he'll want. And he must have a nurse. Can't you nurse him, Mother? You do nurse people so beautifully. But I can't do nursing and my writing as well. Then you must send the letter to his grandfather. Of course, and to his schoolmaster, too. We telegraphed to them both, but I must write as well. They'll be very anxious. I say, Mother, why can't his grandfather pay for a nurse? Peter suggested. That would be exciting. I expect the old man has a lot of money. Grandfathers in books always do. Well, this one isn't in a book, said Mother, so we mustn't expect him to be rich. I say, said Peter, wouldn't it be wonderful if we all were in a book, and you were writing it? Then you could make all sorts of wonderful things happen, and make Jim's legs get well at once and be all right tomorrow, and Father come home soon and— Do you miss your father very much? Mother asked. Yes, said Peter, slowly. You see, now that Father's away there's no other man in the house but me. That's why I want Jim to stay so much. Wouldn't you like to be writing that book with us all in it, Mother, and make Daddy come home soon? Peter's mother put her arm round him suddenly, and hugged him in silence for a minute. Then she said, Don't you think it's rather nice to think that we're in a book that God's writing? If I were writing the book, I might make mistakes. But God knows how to make the story end just right in the way that's best for us. Soon after breakfast next day, a knock came at the door. That'll be the doctor, said Mother. I'll go. Shut the kitchen door. Don't let him see your dirty faces. The boys listened as Mother and the visitor went upstairs. But it wasn't the doctor. They knew that by the voice and by the sound of the boots that went upstairs. They did not recognize the sound of the boots, but everyone was certain that they had heard the voice before. After a while, the bedroom door opened and they heard Mother and the visitor come down and go into the front room of the house. Then they heard Mother calling, Bobbie. They opened the kitchen door, and Mother called again. Jim's grandfather has come, she said. Wash your hands and faces and then you can see him. He wants to see you. The bedroom door shut again. They were still busy cleaning when they heard the boots and the voice come down the stairs and go into the dining room. And when they were clean, they went into the dining room. And there, sitting in the armchair that Father always used to sit in was their own old gentleman. It's our own old gentleman, said Phyllis. Oh, it's you, said Bobbie. And then they remembered their manners and said, How do you do? Very nicely. This is Jim's grandfather, said Mother. How wonderful, said Peter. That's just exactly like a book, isn't it, Mother? It is, rather, said Mother, smiling. Things do happen in real life that are rather like books, sometimes. I am so glad it is you, said Phyllis. You're not going to take Jim away, though, are you? Said Peter. Not at present, said the old gentleman. Your mother has most kindly agreed to let him stay here. I thought of sending a nurse, but your mother is good enough to say that she will nurse him herself. But what about her writing? Said Peter, before anyone could stop him. There won't be anything for him to eat if Mother doesn't write. That's all right, said Mother, quickly. The old gentleman looked very kindly at Mother. Your mother, my dears, has agreed to give up writing, and to become Jim's nurse for a little while, said the old gentleman. And then will Mother go on writing again? Asked Peter. We shall see, said the old gentleman. Perhaps something nice may happen, and she won't have to. I love my writing, said Mother, very quickly. I know, said the old gentleman, but one never knows. Very wonderful and beautiful things do happen, don't they? And we live most of our lives in the hope of them. I may come again to see the boy. Surely, said Mother, and I don't know how to thank you for making it possible for me to nurse him. Dear boy. He kept calling Mother, Mother, in the night, said Phyllis. I woke up twice and heard him. He didn't mean me, said Mother, in a low voice to the old gentleman. That's why I wanted so much to keep him. The old gentleman rose. I'm so glad, said Peter, that you're going to keep him, Mother. Take care of your mother, my dears, said the old gentleman. She's the best woman in the world. Will Bobbie come with me to the gate? At the gate he stopped and said, You're a good child, my dear. I got your letter. But it wasn't necessary. When I read about your father's case in the papers at the time, I had my doubts. And ever since I've known who you were, I've been trying to find out things. I haven't done very much yet. But I have hopes, my dear. I have hopes." "Oh," said Bobbie a little excitedly. "Yes. I may say great hopes. But keep your secret a little longer. Don't tell your mother yet." Chapter 12. The End. Life was never quite the same again after the old gentleman came to see his grandson. Now that mother had no writing, she had time to teach the children the lessons. She also had time for play, and to make up stories for the children as she used to do. Then as Jim's leg got better, it was very pleasant to go up and sit with him and hear tales about his school life and the other boys. Jim taught Peter to play chess, and it was a nice quiet time. The three children began to think that something ought to be done to amuse him. But it was very difficult to think of anything. "I wonder if the railway misses us," said Phyllis sadly one day. "We never go to see it now." "It seems ungrateful," said Bobbie. "We loved it so when we hadn't anyone else to play with. Now we have stopped waving to the 9:15 and sending our love to father by it." "Let's begin again," said Phyllis. So they did. And once more they waved their handkerchiefs to the 9:15. "Take our love to father," cried Bobbie. And the others, too, shouted, "Take our love to father." The old gentleman waved from his first-class carriage window. He waved very hard. And that was nothing strange, for he always had waved. But what was really strange was that from every window handkerchiefs, newspapers and hands waved wildly. After the train ran past, the children were left looking at each other. "Well," said Peter. "Well," said Bobbie. "Well," said Phyllis. "Whatever on earth does that mean?" asked Peter, but he did not expect any answer. "I don't know," said Bobbie. "Perhaps the old gentleman told the people at his station to look out for us and wave. He knew we should like it." Now, this was just what had happened. The old gentleman, who was very well known and respected at his particular station, had got there early that morning. He had waited at the door and had said something to every passenger who passed through that door. And after nodding to what the old gentleman had said, each passenger had gone on to the platform and read one certain part of his newspaper. And when the passengers got into the train, they had told the other passengers who were already there what the old gentleman had said. And then the other passengers had also looked at their newspapers, and seemed very astonished and pleased. Then, when the train passed the fence where the three children were, newspapers and hands and handkerchiefs were waved madly. To the children it almost seemed as though the train itself was alive, and was at last giving back the love that they had given it so freely and so long. "It is very strange," said Peter. "Yes," said Phyllis. But Bobbie said, "Don't you think the old gentleman's waves seemed to mean something?" "No," said the others. "I do," said Bobbie. "I thought he was trying to explain something to us with his newspaper." "Explain what?" asked Peter. "I don't know," Bobbie answered, "but I do feel very funny. I feel just exactly as if something was going to happen." Lessons with mother were difficult to Bobbie that day. She found it hard to think about them. Mother looked at her anxiously. "Don't you feel quite well, dear?" she asked. "I don't know," answered Bobbie. "I don't know how I feel. Mother, will you let me off lessons today? Perhaps I would feel better in the garden." But she could not stay in the garden. The trees and flowers all seemed to be waiting for something to happen. Bobbie could not wait. "I'll go down to the station and talk to Perks," she said. So she went down. Everyone seemed to have a newspaper in their hand that morning. Several people waved theirs at Bobbie, and smiled as she went by. "How strange," said Bobbie to herself, and her heart beat faster. "Something is going to happen. I know it is, everyone is so strange." The station master shook her hand warmly. But he gave her no reason why he was so excited that day. He only said, "The 11:54 is a bit late today. and went away very quickly into his room. Perks was not on the platform, and there was only the station cat. The cat came today to rub herself against the brown stockings of Bobbie with her back, waving tail. "Dear me," said Bobbie, "how very kind everybody is today, even the cat." Perks did not appear until the 11:54 came, and then he, like everybody else that morning, had a newspaper in his hand. "Hello," he said, "here you are. Well, if this is the train, it'll be wonderful. I see it in the paper, and I've never been so pleased about anything in all my life." "But what did you see in the paper?" asked Bobbie. But already the 11:54 was coming into the station. Only 3 people got out of the train. The first was a man with 2 boxes of chickens, the second was a woman with 3 parcels, and the third, "Oh, my daddy, my daddy." That cry went like a knife into the heart of everyone in the train. People put their heads out of the windows to see a tall pale man and a little girl, with their arms around each other. "I knew something wonderful was going to happen," said Bobbie, as they went up the road, "but I didn't think it was going to be this. Oh, my daddy, my daddy." "Then didn't Mother get my letter?" Father asked. "There weren't any letters this morning." "Oh, Daddy, it is really you, isn't it?" He held her hand and said, "You must go in by yourself, Bobbie, and tell Mother quietly that it's all right. They've caught the man who did it. Everyone knows now that it wasn't your daddy." "I always knew it wasn't," said Bobbie. "Me and Mother and our old gentleman." "Yes," he said, "it's all his doing. Mother wrote and told me you had found out." They stopped a minute then. And now they crossed the field. Bobbie went into the house, trying to find the right words to tell Mother quietly that everything was over, and that Father had come home. Father walked in the garden, waiting. He looked at the beautiful flowers, but his eyes kept turning towards the house. And then he left the garden and went to stand outside the nearest door. Now the house door opened. Bobbie's voice called, "Come in, Daddy, come in." He went in and the door was shut. "I think we will not open the door or follow him. I think that just now we are not wanted there. I think it will be best for us to go quickly and quietly away."